Hello, everyone. Welcome to Amarin Trusted Voices webinar series. We're about to get started in just 1 minute, but I wanted to just make sure that folks could hear us okay and that things were coming through okay. So if you are here, can you type in the chat and let us know that you can hear us? I think we have one viewer. If you are there, let us know. Well, I'm going to trust that folks can hear us, and yeah, I think we'll start. What do you think, Felix?
Sure, we get this going.
All right.
Okay. All right, I got it. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at, folks out there. Felix McGowan, Director of ACI. Before we start, I kind of want to have everybody kind of could you keep the folks in the Southeast and up along the coast kind of in your prayers and thoughts. It's been a devastating couple of weeks, and it looks like there's another hurricane in the Gulf Coast waiting to come up on the same path. So keep them in your prayers because we're hoping that the folks in that area can get a break here soon. But again, welcome to Trusted Voices. Trusted Voices is a kind of a thought that we had here at Amarin Critical Infrastructure, along with Amarin Risk, to provide value to the Indian country in different means. So if there's things out there that you're interested in, want to know about, please let us know. Reach out. We can figure that out because we want to make sure we're a value to all y'all and that you know what's going on. So today's webinar is done by Monica, a member of my staff here at ACI. Monica's a Fort Peck, Assiniboine, Lakota, right where I was raised, same town. So it's kind of nice to have her on staff and be able to talk about home. But today we're talking about project management. Monica is a key part of my staff here, has helped support tribes in about $200 to $210 million in grant and contract awards. So integral part and a good person to know if you're curious about how projects run, getting to grants, doing all that kind of thing. So with that being said, Monica, floor is yours.
There we go. Can you hear me okay? Thank you so much, Felix. I really appreciate it. So, yep, today we're going to talk about project management fundamentals for tribes. And I am the project specialist for Amarin Critical Infrastructure. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself before we get started to the basics. But while I'm talking, if you have a question about what I'm sharing or anything, just pop it into the chat. And if there's a good moment to pause and answer that question, I will definitely do that. And if not, I definitely will at the end of the webinar. So what we're going to talk about today are projects, what they are, why we would want to choose to use project management, what the different phases of a project are, and different project management methodologies and frameworks. And then finally, we will discuss different types of applications that you can use to be more organized with your projects. Like I said, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm enrolled at Fort Peck, Assiniboine Sioux tribes. My grandfather was from Standing Rock. My grandmother was from Fort Peck. And they decided they'd raise their family on a whole new reservation. So I actually was born on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation in Montana. And I lived there for the first part of my life. I've actually had a really interesting career. I've worked at the National Museum of the American Indian. I've worked at National Geographic. I was a film programmer for an Indigenous film festival. I worked for an organization called Media Literacy Project, which taught young people how to dissect the media that they're consuming and digital skills and things like that. And then for about 8 years, I was the senior producer for the radio show Native America Calling. And every single one of these jobs that I've had have involved some kind of project management. Um, and what I want to share with you about project management is that we are all project managers, whether you are planning a family vacation or your summer garden, or even a tribal event like a powwow, that involves some aspect of project management. Okay, so we have a pop quiz to get started, and put your answer in the chat. What is project management? Is it A, yelling at people to get their stuff done on time? B, organizing tasks in order to accomplish work that needs to be done for the day? Or C, the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet project requirements? So take a guess. I'll give you a minute. Pop your idea, pop your guess into the chat. We have a little bit of a lag with the, or maybe we've got some shy folks today. Let's see if we can get somebody to answer. Take a guess. Do you think it's A, B, or C? Okay, we've got Preston guessing C. Well, as you can imagine, the answer is, of course, C. Although I do think some people think that project management is yelling at people to get their stuff done on time. Okay, so a project specifically is a temporary, unique thing that has a budget, a team of people working on it, and a clear goal. And project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet project requirements. And this comes from the Project Management Institute, which offers a certification in project management. So why would we want to use project management skills? Well, simply put, it's because we need to get stuff done. It increases the possibility of having a successful project. It helps with time management, which is, incredibly important in our busy lives these days. And it offers explanations and accountability if things go wrong. One big part of project management is documentation and being able to go back and say, well, this thing happened on this date and this person said this thing, can help a lot, particularly if you've got a project going off the rails. So the next question, of course, is, do I need to use these methods that I'm talking about today? And the answer is no, you don't. You can use as little or as much of a project of these aspects of project management as you need for your project. The key is to be deliberate with the planning and the steps of a project. And what I want to say about this is that a lot of this project management methodologies that I'm sharing with you today, they come from Silicon Valley. And so what might work in Silicon Valley might not be useful or effective for example, Fort Peck. Also, as Native people, we have always used our resources wisely and built incredible things like pyramids. And we didn't have project management methodologies to do those things. But I'm a big fan of these types of things if they can help people come together and do things in a cohesive and smart way. Okay, so the project, there's steps in project phases. And the first one is initiation. And when you think about initiation, sometimes it's literally your boss walks into the room and says, you know what would be really interesting? And you think to yourself, okay, here we go. I'm about to get pulled into a project. Another way that initiation can happen is when something needs to get solved. So your group, your tribal councils together, and you're talking about a big problem that you have. In particular, the one that I work on is not having internet, a reliable internet source in your tribal community. And the beginning initiation phase of project planning is literally asking the question, how do we fix this problem? So the next step is planning, and then we have execute. So planning is writing a project plan, including goals. That's the part where the budget is developed, where you find out how much money are we going to need for this, or how much money do we have, and then you work backwards. And then making key tasks and milestones and handing out assignments to people. The next part is execution, and execution is exactly just getting the stuff done, just doing it, right? Finishing the project, building the towers, putting the fiber in the ground, if we're continuing with my example of putting together reliable internet for tribal communities. And then monitoring and control is what should be happening along the way. So is this working for us? Do we need to adjust? Are we on budget? Are we on time? All of those things should be happening along the way. And then at the end, when the project is completed, you do a closing, you wrap everything up, and then it's really critically important to do an evaluation of how did this project go? What were the things that worked really well for us? What were the things that we could have done better? Who are the folks that were incredibly helpful, or what were the kinds of things that we needed to do to move this forward? And I think that we'll probably do a webinar sometime in the future about doing effective evaluations, because I know that it's really hard to share feedback for something that maybe has gone wrong. And people's feelings get hurt. If this is something that you've devoted a lot of time and effort to sit down and face your peers and have one of your peers say, this didn't work this way. And there's definitely a good way to deliver that information so that people's feelings don't get hurt. So we're not necessarily blaming, but using it as a tool to improve for the next project. All right, so the first thing you want to do after the initiation is start with a project charter. And this is essentially a document that is the map that really guides you through your particular project. You start with an executive summary, and an executive summary can just be literally 500 words or less that describes the project, that describes what are we doing here? So we are building an internet network to bring fast, reliable internet to our tribal nation. And then you want to develop a project goal. And I really like the SMART guidelines, or the SMART approach to project goals, which is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And these, you want to ask yourself something very specific, like when you're talking about specific, we are building to 25 homes on the reservation. Measurable, how many? It's going to be 25 people who are going to get internet. Is it attainable? We believe it's attainable if we can do it in a certain amount of time. So that's where the time bound comes in. And if you are trying to build internet to everybody's house, for example, in 6 months, then you have to sort of look back and say, is this even possible to do this in 6 months? And that's, like I said, where the attainable comes in. And then relevant. Wait, do these 25 people in our community actually want internet to their house? That's another part of creating these goals, is making sure that this is a relevant goal to your community. Then you write a list of deliverables. These could be anywhere from, like, we're going to put these things in people's houses, or everybody's going to have these specific things done in this project. For the business case and the background, they're not necessary for every project, but they make a good, they're good to be included, particularly if you have to go to tribal council and get this project passed. You need to have a business case for this particular thing, if it is indeed a business, or you need to have a background, so like I mentioned before, I work on building internet, bringing internet to tribal communities. A lot in the background, we would write something about how during COVID, our students were in the parking lot of McDonald's trying to finish their schoolwork because they couldn't, they didn't have any internet at home and the schools were closed. Or students who were getting packets of worksheets dropped off by a bus because there was no internet possibilities, and then they just sat and did worksheets all week. That's why we need to have internet to our homes. That would be the kind of thing you would write in your background. Then you want to talk about benefits. If we're continuing with our internet, the internet benefits in so many ways: education, health, learning, businesses, any number of things. The costs, how much is this going to cost, both financially, but also time costs? This is something that's really important to include in your project charter, because if this is going to take a lot of time out of the IT department, the planning department, any number of departments in your community or in your tribe, you need to account for that and make sure that those folks have the capacity to do those kinds of things. And then, of course, a budget is literally a breakdown of the costs and how much you have total to spend on this particular project. For scope, that's more definition of exactly what we're working on here. And if you were at the webinar last week, we talked about scope creep, which is essentially, you say, we are building, internet to 25 homes in our nation, and then suddenly someone is having you put satellite dishes on all the houses. That's scope creep. That's outside of the goals and the ideas that we originally started for this project. And so it's a good idea to, again, define the scope of the project, the parameters. And in some cases, I've seen when you write a project charter, you even define what's not in scope. And this is helpful for, particularly if, new people come to the project and they suddenly say, well, why aren't we doing this thing? You can sort of go back to the project charter and say, hey, we're not doing this thing because this is the scope. This is what we all agreed to when we started this project. And then you want a list of your project team. These are all the people, the project manager, the stakeholders, whoever is going to be involved in it, and what their roles are. And I guess I would give a caution to the thing that we love to do so much in Indian country, which is to voluntold people. Make sure that everybody on the team who's working on this project wants to work on this project, that they are invested in working on this project. Because if you have somebody who's voluntold to do this and really doesn't want to, it's going to create a lot of problems when you need to get certain things done, when you need to, finish on time. And then the last thing is you want to define success. So if we're, again, using our example of building internet, success is every single household signs up for internet, uses it, and is able to stream Netflix at the same time. I don't know. You define what the success is of this particular project, And and then at the end, you can sort of check back and say, were we successful? Was this what we wanted? Did we achieve this? So that's a project charter. And if I want to say that maybe some of you are already in the middle of a project, it's not too late to do a project charter, to go back and put these things together to be able to have them as you continue on. Okay, so here's the sort of meat of what I want to share today, which is the project management methodologies and frameworks. So these are frameworks that were, like I said, mostly created by folks in technology and big business, and they are guidelines to help you or recipes, if you will, to help you have a successful project. For today, I'm going to focus on waterfall and agile, which also has something called Scrum in it. But I will touch on the other ones that I have on the screen here just briefly. But the two, I would say the two biggest methodologies are waterfall and agile. All right, so waterfall is a lot like what you would imagine it is. It's basically steps, one after the other of finishing a project. It was invented by Dr. Winston Royce in 1970, and it follows a sequence. It has robust documentation. It's very rigid. So you make a list of requirements, and then you design the thing that you're working on. And if you find in the design that it didn't meet all that you wanted something else, you don't, in the waterfall methodology, you don't go back and change it. It involves minimal customer involvement, which means if you're developing something for the public, you don't really connect with the customers that much to get their feedback. And the requirements and design section of this waterfall method are the two where you spend the most amount of time. And then implementation, verification, and maintenance come after that. And they basically, the idea is if you spent enough time in requirements and design, then you're not going to have a lot of problems in implementation, verification, and maintenance. So this method is really good for projects where maybe it's something you've worked on before and you know the clear steps to get something achieved. It's folks who really kind of want to stick to the policies, plans, things like that. The best way I could just describe waterfall is that it's pretty rigid. The next one is agile, and I would say that this one is probably a lot more popular than waterfall. And the agile methodology was created I believe it was created in Silicon Valley, and it's an approach that involves breaking the project into phases and emphasizes continuous collaboration and improvement. So the teams follow this cycle of planning, executing, evaluating, and it sort of goes in a circle. You can review, and then you can start again. And the reason that this method is a little bit more popular, I think, is because it involves focusing on what the customer wants a lot more than the waterfall methodology. So if a customer comes to you and says, actually, I'd like to pivot to this thing. If you're following the waterfall methodology, there's not, you do your best to convince them not to make any changes. But agile literally means I can move around, I can change, those kinds of things. Let's see, what else do I want to say? So the example I have is, like, for example, if you're going through your project and you present to tribal council, let's say, we're building these, internet to these 25 houses, and this is what we're planning on doing. And tribal council comes back and says, wait, can you add these other 15 houses to your project as long as they're willing to add the budget and move through, then you basically go back and start again with the planning and the designing to add those 15 houses. So it gives you a lot more flexibility. The advantages of Agile are that you can identify problems early on because of the plan, the design. You have this testing period where you're actually looking for, oh, wait, this might be, we have a hiccup in this area or things like that. Some of the disadvantages for Agile is that there's an organizational learning curve that could cost you more money. And when you go back and change things, and sometimes people aren't as flexible to pivot and try something new. And so it's not for everybody. Inside of the Agile framework is this thing called Scrum. And basically, Scrum is a methodology to break down your project into something, breaking it down into something called sprints, which are essentially time-boxed periods where everybody puts their heads together and they work on finishing something, some aspect of it. For example, if we're building a broadband network, there might be a scrum where everybody gets together and designs does the engineering, and we're going to do it from this time to this time, and that's what we're going to focus on. And the term scrum comes from rugby, where everybody comes together. You can see in that picture. I'm not terribly familiar with this sport, but I like the idea of like heads down, let's get to work, basically. And with Scrum, you accomplish some small thing. And I think it's really effective to be able to like sort of go back and show your stakeholders, hey, look, we got this one thing done. We tested it. We looked at it. We're ready to go. Okay, so we have a few other methodologies that I said I would briefly talk about. The first one is Kanban, and this is really a framework that's used in Agile that involves boards. And you sort of think of it as like Post-it notes on a board that you move around. In this example, you can see in this picture, there's a backlog. Those are things that need to get done, doing, review, done, and you just move them around, So if you have one that's like, I'm stuck, you can move this task to I'm stuck, and then whoever's responsible for helping with that will see that in the on the board. And Kanban is really good for folks who are visual, who really like to see how work is moving around, things like that. Lean is a principle that comes from Toyota. It's a business philosophy, or it's described as a business philosophy, and it involves specifying the value of something in the eyes of the customer, identifying the value stream for each product, making the value flow by eliminating waste. That's where the lean comes in, letting the customer pull the flow, and then continuously improving in the pursuit of perfection. And then we have PRINCE 2, which stands for Projects in a Controlled Environment. And this is a process-based method for effective project management. I don't know too much about this PRINCE 2 other than it's used a lot in the UK. And then Six Sigma, which was invented by Bill Smith from Motorola. And there's lots of information online about Six Sigma. But essentially, if you're building something or you're working on a project, you kind of follow this methodology of define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And it's just another way to organize how things are going to get done, evaluate, go back, improve is an important part of project management. And then we have critical chain project management. And this involves monitoring essential resources and prioritizing dependent tasks. So, for example, we know we have to do all of these things in a list, and this one thing can't be done before this other thing. In this particular project management, you start with a big column essentially of the things that are all dependent on each other, and then you can sort of work from each side. Oh, we have to do this thing and this thing and this thing. Okay, so there's all kinds of project management apps out there. Uh, the few that I've listed up here are probably some of the most famous ones: Monday.com, Trello, Wrike, Jira, Slack, Smartsheet, Airtable, ClickUp, and the OG of project management, Microsoft Project. This is the disclaimer that I will give about project management applications, which is that they are only as good as the people who are willing to use them. So essentially, you can put all of your tasks and all of the things that need to get done and all the dependencies and everything like that in your Monday.com board. And if nobody on your team is logging in and looking at it and using it and updating it, it's useless. No matter how shiny and fancy it looks, how many pictures, if you can't get everybody on board to use the app, then you know, there's no point in going for something fancy. Monday.com, I like it. I use it for a few of my clients. It involves a visual representation of the work that needs to get done. You can do deadlines. You can assign things to people with their picture on it. You can prioritize. There's all kinds of different things that you can adjust to make, your Monday.com work for you. The one thing I like about Monday.com is when you click done, there's these little like fireworks that celebrate with you that you finished a task. Trello is another one where this is the Kanban board that I was talking about. And essentially you just pick these tiles up and move them around or mark them as finished, things like that. But it's essentially just organizing your tasks in a visual way. You can also pick images and graphics and pictures. I think for someone who's really visually motivated, this is great, but also you can end up wasting a lot of time trying to find the perfect picture to go with the perfect task. So a note of caution there. And then I just have to give a shout out for the old school to-do list, literally a Word document or an Excel where you list off everything that needs to get done and maybe another thing next to it of who is going to do these things. Either way, whatever you use, it's really important that you do something, that you write these things down, that you keep track of what's going on and how to get these projects done. Otherwise, if it goes off the rails, then you don't have any documentation for what went wrong. And that's it. That's the basics of project management. I want to give you an opportunity if you've got any questions about project management, put them in the chat. I will answer them live. I also have my email address up and my phone number. Feel free to give me a call or email me if you want to ask, any further questions about project management or planning projects, or maybe you have a project that you're working on that you want to pick my brain on. Absolutely. But if you've got any questions, I'll just hang out here for a little bit and answer your questions. And I want to thank you so much for coming to my webinar today. We really, really appreciate it. I think it's one of those things where with the webinar, if you go over a lot of information in a short amount of time, it's, you know, maybe I answered every single question. Thanks, Preston. Appreciate it. All right. So you've got my email. I'm going to send an email out to everybody after this. And you are more than welcome to send me an email if you have any questions. But I will give you the rest of your day back. Thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it.